Okay, so maybe you're thinking about starting Along Came a Spider.
Hmm.
You know, the one that kicked off that whole Alex Cross series by James Patterson?
Yeah.
It's a big decision, right? Especially when a series gets that long.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the first book can really make or break the whole thing for you.
Right.
So to help you decide if it's worth your time, we are going deep.
We are.
I've got Goodreads reviews.
Yeah, sure.
Of course, we found a really interesting blog post by Luke Harkness breaking down the book.
Okay.
And even some notes for a video review.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at like all these different angles.
That's interesting.
The fans, the critics, maybe even some more professional takes.
So, well, let's get right to it then. I'd say, yeah, it eyes us worth reading.
Okay.
But with a caveat.
Okay, I like it.
If you're looking for some kind of like really complex, literary masterpiece.
Right.
This isn't it.
Yeah, fair enough.
But if you just want a fast-paced thriller, that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.
Oh, cool.
Especially if you love a good villain.
Okay.
Along Came a Spider really delivers.
I'm seeing that in some of the Goodreads reviews, that like page-turner aspect.
Yeah.
Definitely comes through. But some people are saying the writing is kind of basic, even repetitive. Does that take away from the enjoyment?
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
And it comes down to Patterson's style, you know? He's all about short chapters, punchy sentences. Like, it's almost written in these, like, bursts of action.
Interesting.
I can see why some readers would find it simplistic. But honestly, that's what creates that relentless pace that thriller fans crave. It's like he's constantly throwing punches at you.
Oh, okay.
Keeping you off balance.
So it's more about the effect than the style itself.
Exactly.
All right. But what about Alex Cross himself, the main character?
Right.
A few reviewers said he was not that believable.
Yeah, this is where things get interesting.
Okay.
They have to remember, this book came out in the early 90s.
That's true.
And back then, having a Black protagonist who's also a PhD holding detective, that was groundbreaking. There's a Goodreads reviewer named Brianna, and she pointed out that Patterson, who's white, he seemed to be making a real effort with Cross's representation.
Okay.
Maybe even overdoing it at times.
Huh. That's a really good point about the context,
Yeah.
Definitely adds another layer to think about while reading.
Absolutely.
What about Gary Soneji, though? The antagonist.
Soneji.
A lot of the reviewers seem really fascinated by him.
Soneji is what makes this book stand out. I think he's this genius-level psychopath.
Okay.
But Patterson goes beyond the, typical evil villain tropes. Like, we get glimpses of his past, his warped logic.
Interesting.
Which adds this chilling complexity. The reviewer Ryan Gillespie said that seeing Soneji get busted was a highlight for him.
Oh, wow.
And I think that shows just how effectively Patterson makes you want to see this guy taken down.
Yeah. Okay, so gripping pace, fascinating villain.
Right.
But then there's the romance subplot.
Yes.
Some reviewers found it distracting, even a little off-putting. Does it take away from the thriller part?
Honestly, the romance isn't the strongest part of the book. One reviewer, Mary Statza, even called the love scenes off-putting.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's not a deal breaker for everyone, but it's worth noting. The romance tries to add a human dimension to Cross, I think.
Okay.
Show his vulnerability, but it doesn't always land smoothly.
Gotcha. Okay, so fast-paced, intriguing villain.
Right.
But what about the plot itself?
Right.
What can you tell us about the story without spoiling anything?
Well, at its core, Along Came a Spider is this high-stakes kidnapping case.
Okay.
But there are some serious twists and turns. The victims, they're not just random kids. Their parents are these powerful figures. So you've got this added layer of political intrigue and media frenzy.
Interesting.
One Goodreads reviewer, James Patterson, said the book kept him guessing till the very end.
Oh, wow.
So it sounds like Patterson really delivers on the suspense.
Now, the blog review by Luke Harkness mentioned themes of race and equality woven into the story. Can you talk more about that?
This is where the book goes beyond just pure entertainment.
Okay.
Harkness points out how Patterson uses this thriller framework to actually explore the socio-political climate of the early 90s.
Oh, interesting.
And remember, Alex Cross is a Black detective.
Right.
Navigating a system that's often stacked against him.
Yeah.
We see racial tensions play out in the investigation, the media coverage, even in Cross's personal life.
Huh. That adds a whole other dimension then. It's not just about catching the bad guy.
Exactly.
It's about navigating this complex social landscape.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of catching the bad guy.
Yeah.
One Goodreads review mentioned plot holes you could drive a truck through.
Oh, yeah.
How big of a problem is that?
There are definitely some moments where you have to suspend your disbelief.
Okay.
That's for sure. But I think Harkness makes a good point in his blog.
What's that?
He says even those plot holes can be interesting to examine in their own right.
How so?
Well, they can reveal the biases and assumptions of the time the book was written.
Huh. That's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
Instead of just dismissing them as flaws,
right,
we can see them as reflections of a particular cultural moment.
Exactly.
Okay, so how does Along Came a Spider compare to other popular thrillers?
Right.
Especially from the same era.
I mean, it definitely shares some DNA with what we might call airport thrillers.
Okay.
Those fast-paced, entertaining reads you grab for a long flight or a beach vacation.
Right.
Think like David Baldacci or Harlan Coben.
Gotcha.
But what sets Along Came a Spider apart is that blend of social commentary with that heart-pounding action.
You mentioned earlier that this book might not be for everyone.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that? What kind of reader wouldn't enjoy this book?
Well, if you're looking for deep character studies or really nuanced prose, this probably isn't the right pick. Patterson's strength is plotting and creating suspense.
Okay.
Not necessarily crafting literary masterpieces.
Makes sense. It's about knowing what you're in the mood for, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, what about those video instructions we mentioned?
Oh, yeah.
What insights did they offer?
They're fascinating because they offer this behind-the-scenes look at how book reviews are evolving.
Okay.
It seems like this video review wants to capture the emotional experience of reading Along Came a Spider.
Interesting. So not just the plot points.
Right. They talk about pacing flow, memorable moments, things that might not come across in a traditional written review.
So conveying the feeling of the book.
Exactly.
Huh. Yeah. That's a really interesting approach. They also mentioned the importance of critical analysis, though.
Yes.
Looking at character development and plot structure. What are your thoughts on those aspects?
Well, as we've discussed, character development isn't really Patterson's primary focus.
Yeah.
His characters tend to serve the plot more than being fully fleshed out individuals.
Okay.
But the plot itself, while admittedly having a few holes, is undeniably gripping. It keeps you guessing, throws in twists and turns, and ultimately delivers a satisfying resolution.
It sounds like you have to be willing to accept those flaws.
Yeah.
In order to just enjoy the ride.
I think so.
So for someone who's still on the fence about reading this, what's the key takeaway you want them to have?
I think the most important thing is to remember that this is a 90s thriller.
Okay.
With all the tropes and conventions that come with that genre.
Right.
It's a product of its time. And while some aspects might feel a bit dated to modern readers, it's still an incredibly entertaining and influential book.
That's a great point. Appreciate it for what it is. A classic 90s thriller.
Yeah.
That really paved the way for so many books that came after.
Absolutely.
And who knows? Maybe you'll find a newfound appreciation for those old school tropes.
It's possible.
I've talked a lot about the technical stuff, the writing, the plot, the characters.
Right.
But I'm curious about the feel. What kind of experience can a reader expect from Along Came a Spider?
That's a great question. And it's something those video instructions really focused on. Beyond just the plot points, what's the emotional impact?
Right.
I think Along Came a Spider. It's a book that gets under your skin.
Really?
It's tense, suspenseful, almost claustrophobic at times.
Yeah, I can see that. Even just reading the description, you get that sense of urgency, danger around every corner.
Definitely.
Kidnapped kids, the race against time, that chilling intelligence of the villain. It all adds up to a pretty intense experience.
Absolutely. Patterson's a master at creating suspense.
Yeah.
Those short chapters, the cliffhangers, it all just keeps you on edge. And the settings he uses, too, like the darkness of the projects or the sterile environment of a hospital.
Oh, yeah.
Really adds to that overall atmosphere of dread.
It sounds like a book that'll keep you up at night looking over your shoulder.
Yeah.
But beyond the suspense, there's the emotional weight of what Alex Cross is going through.
Yeah.
I mean, he's dealing with the pressure of the case, his own personal demons, and then the added burden of navigating a society with so much racial tension.
That's what makes Cross such a compelling character.
Yeah.
He's not just some two-dimensional hero. He's flawed, vulnerable, carrying a lot on his shoulders.
Right.
You find yourself rooting for him, even when he makes questionable decisions.
So it's not just about the mystery. It's about connecting with him on a human level.
Exactly.
Feeling his struggles and triumphs.
Yeah.
I bet that climax, the final confrontation with Soneji, must be pretty intense.
Without giving anything away.
Yeah, of course.
I'd say the climax really delivers on the buildup. It's a satisfying resolution.
Okay.
To all the threads Patterson's woven together. You see the investigation come to a head, the Cross facing his own demons.
Right.
And those social issues we talked about, they all play out in a dramatic way.
Now, I'm really intrigued, but before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about Along Came a Spider being a product of its time.
Right.
Do you think it's aged well?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
There are definitely elements that might feel a bit dated to modern readers.
Like what?
Some of the character portrayals, the pacing, even some of the plot devices. They all reflect those, sensibilities of the 90s.
Yeah, maybe that's part of the appeal.
Maybe.
It's like a time capsule.
Right.
Giving us a glimpse into a specific era. Not just in crime fiction, but in society, too.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the reasons why revisiting older books can be so rewarding.
Yeah.
It's a chance to examine our own evolving perspectives.
Right.
See how much has changed or maybe hasn't changed in the world around us.
So for our listener who's still on the fence about reading this, what's the final verdict?
I'd say if you're looking for a fast-paced, suspenseful thriller that will keep you on the edge of your seat, this one's worth checking out.
Okay.
Just go in with the understanding that it's a product of its time, and you might be pleasantly surprised.
I love that. Appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah.
A classic 90s thriller that paved the way for so many others.
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe you'll find a newfound appreciation for those old school tropes.
Absolutely. There's always something to be discovered in the pages of a book.
Well said.
Even if it's not a brand new release.
And on that note, we'll leave our listener to make their own decision. Is Along Came a Spider the kind of reading experience you're craving right now?
Right.
Only one way to find out. Dive in and see for yourself.